guest today is Paul Philbert, MBE, Principal Timpani at the Scottish Royal National Orchestra, Principal Timpani at Chinike Orchestra.
Mr. Philbert, welcome.
Thank you.
This is the future under construction. That's what the channel is for. It's basically to help teenagers, help other people who are looking to diversify their their professions and looking into other avenues that they can use to generate an income. Mr. Philbert, you are a timpanist, professional timpanist, MBE. Why music?
It was with me from a very early age. Started in my single figures, actually. In fact, I'm going to see if I can find you a picture of me in my choral days. Basically, I went to a stage school for not very long, because my mother, and the picture's right there, you see, so I can show it to you straight away. That's me.
Very
That's
nice.
a little boy treble. So more than a few years ago. My music teacher at Hamilton House School, a very softly spoken Welshman by the name of James Simpson, if I remember correctly, who, from my young perspective, seemed to play every musical instrument. He spotted my ability as a musician, initially as a singer. And so he set about putting me in a little, well, I was in the school choir, obviously. I used to sing close two-part harmony with a girl called Angela Mead, who I have not found on Facebook or anywhere else. I have no idea what her married name is. If she is married, no idea about her at all. But we used to sing close two-part harmony things together. And between him and the headmistress, a lady called Miss Pilgrim, they alerted my mother to my propensities, and together they set about trying to find me a place to continue my musical education, but in a specialist kind of way. So I auditioned for St. Paul's Choir School. I think Latimer also had a good music faculty thing going on. Where else? I can't remember where else, apart from the place which I ended up, which was the Purcell School of Music. And I started going there at the age of 9, essentially on the strength of my singing voice. And I had very, very, very rudimentary piano skills. So I got in, I joined the St. Christopher's Choristers. My form tutor was also the head of the St. Christopher's Choristers. Is a lovely lady who's now since passed away, actually quite recently. Her name is Anne Osborne. And, well, the environment at the school has always been potent with music. And because it's normal, you don't really understand that you're being given this supercharged musical environment. But basically, every morning you go into school, and I think must have been 8:30 or something. Every day it starts with half an hour of sight singing. They used to hand out these little books with maybe, I don't know, 50 or 100 different tunes in them: soprano, alto, tenor, bass. And they'd say, turn to page on number, 31. Soprano, alto, tenor, bass, off you go. There's the starting chord, and you sing. Half an hour of that every single morning. And then normal classes, and then music classes, and there was orchestra, and later on they started to introduce electronic music, and I jumped on that because I loved all of that stuff. What else? Well, I should tell you about my instrumental journey, because as I say, I got in on the strength of my voice and rudimentary piano.
Before you get into your instrumental journey,
Mm.
as a child, I think at that particular age,
Mm.
how did all of this kind of sink in? Did, did it come take it? Did you take it naturally, or was there some resistance to it initially?
None whatsoever. Um, in all honesty, I feel like I daydreamed my way through life until puberty. That's when I started to wake up. Um, I enjoyed music. I enjoyed singing. I used to, even at Hamilton House, with the choir, we used to sing to was it the Duchess of Kent every year at the Churchill Hotel in London. There were various singing engagements, so I wasn't shy about performing because
Okay,
it was no big deal. It was
okay.
something that we just did, which I suppose in retrospect has been invaluable for me in my career. Um, but as I say, it just felt normal. It
And,
it felt, yeah, there
and
was
your
nothing to it.
and your parents, how did they take to it? Were they encouraging of it, or did they have?
Um,
Because if you're thinking about it, typically parents, would look at, say, the safest route to their child's
mm,
success, you
mm,
know, doctor, teacher, nurse, and
yeah.
then you throw music in the mix. From my experience, I wanted to become an architect, and I met a lot of resistance to that because there was no case study for it,
Mm,
as you'd say, yeah. So how did your parents sort of take to it?
okay, so my father wasn't really around. They separated when I was quite young, um, and the final separation took place, I think, when I was 8 or 9 years old. In fact, I was 8.
Mm.
And let's see. Um, yeah, he wasn't really very supportive. I'll put it that way. My mother, and particularly in retrospect, did a remarkable thing, putting both myself and my sister through private school. Um, and she pushed us hard. She's the equivalent, I think, of what the modern definition of tiger mum is. I remember I was having some trouble with my quadratic equations. I couldn't get them. And I came home from school and I told her that I'd been put in the B group in maths, and she hit the roof. Went to school, shouted at them, made the maths teacher cry, said, "My son is not stupid. You can't do this. How dare you do this? Blah, blah, blah." Came home, shouted at me, said, "Look, this is what I've done. You need to prove to them that you're not stupid." And she arranged for extra lessons for me for maths. And I got quadratic equations, and then I was fine. So she pushed, and she had enormous ambition. And, she arrived in the UK in the 60s, mid to late 60s, and there were still signs up saying, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. That was still a thing.
Hmm.
So she encountered a very hostile situation, looked at the kind of social strata, and decided that a private school education would be the best way to enable her offspring to get ahead.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I've spoken about this before, but um, unless somebody sees my face, they wouldn't identify the voice that they hear with a black person.
Yeah, that is very true.
The camouflage
Mm.
that offers has and I've had some very interesting reactions over the years. But she was cognizant of the power of a full and privileged education.
Mm-hmm.
So she worked like stink. She did her very, very best, put me through school. Towards the end, things started, obviously, inflation. Things get more and more expensive. And she was, working as a nurse and health worker, which wasn't, I mean, it paid, obviously, but it didn't pay enormously. And by the end of my school time, she was in quite a lot of debt. So I remember having to negotiate a sort of repayment to the Purcell School for fees owed that I think I paid out of we used to have student grants back then.
Mm.
So I used a portion of my student grant over, I think, maybe a couple of years to pay off the remainder of my school fees. But, you do what you have to. And like I say, my mother did an incredible thing in bringing us up and giving us the education that she did and the start in life that she did, and the foundations, the ethics, the drive, the understanding, all of the tools that we needed. She did an incredible thing for which I can never repay her.
So you get to the point where you've completed your, I would assume, high school education, and you are now looking to go into music full time, whether it is through study or. Tell me about that transition. How did you make the move from high school into a professional career in music?
Okay, I will go back and tell you about my instrumental journey, because we dropped that point along the way.
Yeah.
And the lead up to this. So, rudimentary piano and voice. I took up the violin. I struggled with that simply because I could never. It frustrated me that I couldn't always play in tune.
Mm-hmm.
But I persisted with that because apparently I had a good sound. So I got up to, I think, about grade 5 on that or something. My mum bought me 2 violins. One was actually quite a lovely older instrument. But the frustration surrounding not being able to play in tune all the time drove me insane. And I think at that stage, I took up the clarinet and I dropped the piano. And I had an enormous crush on my clarinet teacher. So I used to work really hard to please her, really hard, and that got me quite far quite quickly. But then I started to kind of flounder as things get more technical with the fingers and embouchure as well. That was another thing. No, she was my second clarinet teacher. My first clarinet, and I had to relearn a different technique, which meant biting into my lip. I mean, I don't have the scars anymore, but little calluses on the inside of it. Nonsense. I'll stop that. So clarinet was okay for a while, and then it floundered. I tried. There was an open term, I think it was autumn term, one of the years I was at school, and we got to try all of the brass instruments. I tried trumpet, trombone, tuba, French horn, everything. I could get really high notes on the instrument. I mean, tuba was a non-starter for me, but like trumpet and the horn, I could get high notes, but I couldn't relax my lips enough to get the low notes, so that didn't go anywhere. And the director of music at the school at the time called us into his office. I think there were 6 of us in this group. And he said, "This is a specialist music school, and none of you appear to be specializing in any particular instrument. We're thinking about starting percussion lessons. Are you interested?" And of course, young boy hitting things, it's a given that they're going to be interested. But at this stage, as I say, my mum had bought me 2 violins. She'd bought a clarinet for me. She'd spent a lot of money on music lessons. And me coming home saying, "Oh, I want to try percussion," it wasn't something that she was going to be that keen on. But my winning argument was I will only need one pair of sticks, 3 books, and a practice pad. And on the strength of that, she said, "Oh, okay, fine."
Okay.
I got the sticks, the practice pad, the books, and I started my percussion lessons. And it was like somebody switching on a light. My very first percussion lesson, it felt like this is the thing that I must do, must do. And a few months later, after I had my basic technique sorted out, I had my first timpani lesson. And it felt like I had an edict, a pronouncement. This is your thing. And, you know, for the very first time, my mum didn't have to nag me to practice. I was there. I was doing it. I was doing it all myself. I was so strongly motivated. And so that took me, and I started late. I think it must have been around 15. So by the time people were auditioning for music college and, you know, taking next steps, I'd been learning for about a year and a bit, maybe, not long, considering there were people when, you know, 8 or 9 years previous, when I started at the school, there were people who were whizzing around on the violin like you wouldn't believe. And, you know, incredible pianists. Just, I was in an environment that was so saturated with musical talent. I mean, it remains a remarkable place. I went back recently to adjudicate a concerto competition, and you know, the ethic is still the same, the drive is still the same, the talent pool is still so vibrant and rich. It's spectacular, fabulous place. But as I say, me, fledgling percussionist. But I thought, no, I'm going to audition. So I thought I'm going to stay in London because financially it makes more sense for me to have to leave home and have to be paying rent and all of this stuff. This is not practical. So I only auditioned for the 4 London colleges at the time, not including the London College of Music. I auditioned for Guildhall School of Music and Drama, the Royal Academy of Music, the Royal College of Music, and Trinity College of Music. Just those 4. And I think my Trinity audition was first. It was absolutely hellish. I woke up on the morning of the audition, switched on, it was LBC I used to listen to hear that all of the train services in my area were messed up. Piccadilly line, which is the closest, severe delays, don't even try it. And I can't remember what else. The Central line also completely a mess. So I had to get on a bus to go up to Harrow on the Hill to get the Metropolitan line in, which is going way out of my way to come back into, anyway. And then I changed at Baker Street to get the Jubilee line down to Bond Street, which is where Trinity used to be back in the day.
Back in the day.
Yes, I've aged myself by saying that. And it was cold. It was, you know, December. This would have been when 1989, I think. I got out of Bond Street. I was already into my warm-up time. I had no idea where I was going. I flagged down a taxi. I said, "Take me to Trinity College of Music, please." And he switched on the heater, warmed my hands up. Thank goodness for that. Really. Calmed me down while he was driving, you know, just chatting and saying, "Oh, it'll be fine, blah, 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 blah." Arrived, I think I had maybe 5 minutes of my warm-up left. Auditioned. And of the 4 auditions I did for those 4 music colleges, Trinity was by far the most stressful. I
can imagine. I can imagine.
I was so distraught come the end of that half hour in the room. I thought I played terribly. I mean, it was like unlike anything that I could possibly have expected. But They offered me an unconditional place.
Amazing.
I kind of know why. I've talked to them both about it since, and there was a moment I remember where I'd played the timpani excerpts, the repertoire, and John Chimes, who was my timpani professor, got up and he shoved me out of the way and said, "Yeah, can you play it like this?" And he played. And it was unlike anything that I'd seen before or heard before. It's like, oh. And all I remember, I paid very close attention, and I tried to imitate what I had seen. That's all I did. And I know to this day that what I did after I'd seen him play was very different to what I'd done before.
Mm-hmm.
I've no idea about it, but I think it was in that they saw,
It's teachable.
yes, and I think that's what did it for me. So anyway, I by the time I'd finished at Purcell, I knew I was going straight into music college at Trinity, and that was a violent learning curve. You know, if I thought that the audition was where it ended for stress, I was so wrong. It was well, I remember being introduced in the very first group lesson to the concept of your relationship with your instrument.
Mm.
And this was something that I'd not even thought about before. It had always just been about, playing the right note at the right time, at the right dynamic. And that's kind of it, which is a very binary principle. It was enough to get me that far, but suddenly I'm being told about how I am standing behind the instrument that I'm playing and the information that communicates to an audience.
Mm. The emotion behind the music.
Yes. And I understand it now, and I teach it now myself. But at the time, it was radically new information and knocked me for six. But those guys, John Chimes, Kevin Nutty, I owe them so much for their wisdom and their patience and their generosity, because they were both very helpful, giving me a hand up into the business, offering me professional work, and they've both been fabulous.
Mm. So for somebody looking to go into music, what advice, say to a parent, what advice would you give them who's trying to nurture their child into this field?
What advice? The business has changed a lot since I started. I'll tell you that for nothing. What advice? I'd say the music business is music is a calling. And if you have offspring that are interested in doing that thing, do everything in your power to support them, because that calling is almost impossible to switch off. And I say that having been in the business now for more than 30 years. And as I say, it has changed. I think it's a lot more stressful now. But I'm still here. I'm still doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my wife will come and see me play, and she's, very often she says, "Yeah, you need to be doing this." And I know it's in my blood. I must. This is what I must do somehow. So if that is the way that your child feels, or even if they just want to explore it, and this is something that I will say, I think that music should be an important part of every child's education, irrespective of whether or not that is the area in which they wish to pursue a career. Because, and this is scientifically proven, the neural pathways that are formed whilst you are engaged in this pursuit. They nurture your cognitive ability in areas of maths, science, language. There's a social element to music as well. There are so many other areas in which it enriches, and that it remains an option in today's national curriculum is woefully inadequate. I think personally that some of the most basic areas of social dysfunction would be diminished or possibly eliminated if music tuition was something that was ubiquitous in the UK. I really do, simply because it offers a different way of thinking about yourself. It adds value. I sit as a member of the board for Systema Scotland, who specifically target deprived, underprivileged areas in Scotland. They're based in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee, Aberdeen, and Stirling. There are 5 major centres, and Philbert, which is kind of Dundee, Stirling, in between. And the work that they do is fabulous. It's kind of they become an adjunct to whatever music is being offered in the local school, which is usually not very much. It's orchestra based, so they offer group lessons, individual lessons when possible, and lots of group activities. And it's very much geared to the relationship between the students and the organization itself. But the enrichment that it brings, and to the community, not just the children, but to the families, the enrichment it brings is invaluable. And this should be everybody's experience in the UK as a young child, I think. And I think it would change very much.
Yeah, I actually have my wife nagging me about finding a music tutor for my daughter, who seems to have taken to music quite a bit at her school. So, yeah, it's a conversation. I'll probably reach out to you and find out, best ways of helping her, because she seems to have taken up quite a bit. In terms of the orchestra, tell me a bit about your first experience playing professionally. How did that go? Were there any nerves? Were there any doubts?
Doubts? No. No. Nerves? Probably. Although again, as I say, I think that the foundation I had back in Hamilton House doing those performances before stress was even a concept that I understood properly, I think that made everything a lot easier for me with regards to public performance. And all I can say about stress is that if I am properly prepared, if I was properly prepared in the past, that I didn't have any nerves. I don't anymore. I used to get a small burst of adrenaline, little burst of butterflies just before my first entry, and that was it. If ever I was nervous, it was because there was a doubt in my mind, because I knew that I hadn't done the work, and there was a possibility that I could fall off the train. But nerves have never debilitated me. No.
Do you remember what your first professional appearance was?
That I got paid money for? It was probably my Kevin Nutty, my percussion professor, he used to be the principal percussionist of the English National Ballet.
Hmm.
And he would always put excerpts, the trickiest excerpts from Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker, on the first year exam repertoire requirements, and we were required to play them. And so I played that, and then the following, because this would be in 1991, I was invited to perform Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker with English National Ballet. That's probably the first time. Actually, no, that wouldn't have been my first professional gig. That'd have been my first capital P professional gig. In terms of working with a professional ensemble. But in terms of paid work as a musician, there's a guy called Andrew Barnard, who's a dear friend of mine, who owns all of his own percussion gear, timpani and percussion, and he fixes a lot of work with amateur ensembles across London. He's part of a small kind of timpani and percussion mafia of individuals. They own all their own instruments, and so they facilitate lots of performances for choral societies and the like. And it is he who would have almost definitely given me my first paid work as a percussionist.
Yeah.
So
I'd definitely say you have a lot of people to thank for the journey to getting to where you are now.
Absolutely, yes.
Before we got into our conversation, we did talk a bit about the travel. You did mention that it does sort of take a toll on you, on anyone really. You traveling different time zones quite a bit. How does that fit into your normal routine of being a husband, being sitting on boards, and how does that fit in with all the limited amount of time that you have?
Quite often with difficulty. Thank goodness for mobile video communication that exists now. Zoom has made meetings possible that were never possible before. Thank goodness for that. I remember taking a board meeting in a queue. Thank goodness for Brexit, in an immigration queue waiting to get into Europe. I was stuck for I think about an hour and a half in the queue waiting to get my passport verified. And I took the complete meeting in the queue. I had my phone there, my earbuds in, and I was, I think I may even have participated a little bit, but I was present. I heard everything that was said. I think I may type some things in the chat or something like that. Not that long ago, that was not possible. So that's enabled that aspect of it. And in terms of, FaceTime and Kakao Talk and all of these different apps, WhatsApp, staying in touch with my wife is not a problem. And if she's traveling, if I'm traveling, we always aim to say good morning and good night. At the very least.
At the very least.
Yeah.
And your wife is also in music. She is a violinist.
She's a pianist.
She
is what I would describe as a very keen amateur violinist. Very keen.
Very keen. Because
very keen.
I think the first time I did see her, I think I saw her playing the violin, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember. This was in Malaysia.
In Malaysia?
Did she play the violin?
She used to play with with one of the orchestras. I can't remember what the name was. In KL Pak. She used to lead the second violins. So you may well have seen her performing with them. I think, in fact, I am told that I adjudicated one of the shows that she was performing in for the Beau Cameronian Arts Awards.
Mm.
Yeah, that's before we met, actually, which is interesting. But by then, I was already on her radar. She just hadn't met yet. So she knew I was there. Apparently caused quite a stir. You know, MPO Timpanist in the audience.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, no, she's very talented as a pianist. She can sight read stuff that would take me my entire life to be able to play on the piano. And you know, she'll plonk it on the music stand, and she'll just go plonk 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 plonk, and she just rattles it off. I don't know how she does it. It is incredible to me. At the moment, I think she's primarily engaged in teaching.
Okay.
She's secured a position as one of the piano tutors at the High School of Glasgow. They have a fantastic music department there, and that gets very active and busy for her between teaching and accompanying choirs and accompanying exams and stuff. She's very busy with that. Started teaching at the junior school now as well. But she also she works with the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra and the RSNO. So there's enough there to keep her busy.
No, that's good. Well, one of these days when I travel up to Scotland, I have a request for her to play Rachmaninoff's piano concerto in C. It's 18 in C minor. That is my favorite.
Was that number 2?
Number 2, yes. That is my favorite. That is my absolute favorite of all time.
If you have the dots, she'll sight read it for you. Really.
Well, as we come to the end of our conversation, Paul, it is an absolute honor to have had a chat with you. Absolute pleasure to have seen you play for almost 5 years straight. I tried to be there every Saturday night at the Malaysian Philharmonic. It was absolutely amazing. I think my appreciation for orchestra music was enhanced by, my conversations with you, especially, I would say from the perspective of learning how to feel music, understanding the emotion behind the notes that is being played. I think that's been an exceptional thing that I've learned, which has changed my perspective really on music and how I relate to music. And I think once people understand that relationship, they view music in a completely different way. So, Paul,
very sweet of you to say. Thank you. And it is my pleasure, my privilege to catch up with you. It's lovely to see you. It really is. And
absolutely. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.